She speaks in rhyme. It's weird.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children.
The bus will go here and then the bus will go there because that's what buses do. And it's weird.
For us at every moment in time, and certainly this one, to see the moment in time in which we exist and are present, and to be able to contextualize it, to understand where we exist in the history and in the moment as it relates not only to the past but the future.
The whole thing is weird. This is not a president of the United States future.
I do believe that we should have rightly believed, but we certainly believe that certain issues are just settled. Certain issues are just settled.
Clearly we're not.
No, that's right, and that's why I do believe that we are living, sadly, in real unsettled times.
Joe Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way. She was born that way.
People have been saying how close this election is and ignoring the fact that we are either going to see something for the first time since 1856 or something for the first time since 1892. Okay, in 1856, it's the one and only time that a replacement candidate for a sitting president has gone on to win. James Buchanan replaced Franklin Pierce. And, of course, in 1892, I say of course, but the point is Grover Cleveland, the only non-consecutive two-term president. And that could happen again if Trump wins. So right away, I think that's pretty crazy. Now, to give me my clear prediction, I can start off by saying I have Trump winning back Arizona and Georgia, holding on to North Carolina, and flipping Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Just doesn't win Wisconsin. Much more intriguing, however, are the 269 scenarios, which I think there are several. And we're going to start off with the one where it has Trump just taking back Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. You can, of course, flip North Carolina with Georgia, so that's kind of like the second scenario. The other scenario that we have is that he wins Nevada, but he doesn't take back the Arizona and the Georgias where he's leading, and he wins all three of the Rust Belt or Northeast states. Then you have the scenario where he wins back Arizona and he flips New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Michigan, a lot less likely, but okay. And then we have a complete outlier where he takes back Arizona, he takes back Georgia, he wins Wisconsin and Michigan, loses Pennsylvania, picks up New Hampshire, and loses Iowa. So, those are the 269s. Then move on to the 270, and let's just do Harris here. What's interesting is that Harris would really just need to win all three of the Northeast states, okay, and she would win by one electoral college vote. Consequently, as the interesting one that's been brought up, is that Trump could essentially win the election by flipping back Georgia and winning Pennsylvania, right? And on the East Coast, then he doesn't need to win back Arizona. He doesn't need Nevada. He's going to win, but just by a single electoral college vote. And then, of course, because of the polls the way that they are, we look at a Trump blowout, which would be him winning all 7 states, plus Virginia and New Mexico. And interesting, with Virginia and New Mexico, a Republican hasn't won that since Bush in 2004, coincidentally, the last time that the Republicans won the popular vote, which I do not have them winning. I don't think that Trump is going to come back, make up the 7 million vote margin with Biden, and win the popular vote. But it's an interesting scenario. Now I'm going to spend some time talking about the rhetoric of the campaign. There's really nothing, unless we're looking at the previous 2 elections, that compares this more closely than the 1964 campaign between Lyndon B. Johnson and Barry Goldwater, where Lyndon B. Johnson basically ran this Daisy ad, very famous ad,
9, 9.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson.
You can't lead America if you don't love Americans. You just
The whole Trump is Hitler rhetoric has always been kind of like a low-hanging fruit, lazy, referential work, especially when you look at The Atlantic, for example, saying that he speaks like Hitler, Stalin, and Mussolini. I mean, there are three different personalities, and Stalin wasn't really this known orator like the other two, and also communist. But why wouldn't you just compare an actual American Nazi if you're going to go down that route, like George Lincoln Rockwell, who, fun fact, it was an interesting time, but he appeared at a Malcolm X rally, actually, to give a speech because they both agreed that the races should be separate. Interesting. The equivalent on the other side would be like calling Kamala not just communist, but like Pol Pot, right? So she's a genocidal maniac because that's what she wants to do. She wants to revert people to like this, as she has pointed out, this equity, right? So it's not just about everybody has equal opportunity. No, everybody has to finish in the same place. It's very much like Pol Pot in Year Zero, if you're going to look up that. And the whole issue with that, without getting too much into another topic entirely, is the fact that, like affirmative action, the issue is you want to create a system where everybody has an equal opportunity. If you try to push favoritism and you try to, quote-unquote, make up for the system being inadequate, you eventually just by default favor one group of people over another. And this is the controversy with Kamala Harris. But to go back, another aspect is how this all came about and how she became this candidate. And I would like to show a couple of clips of Vivek Ramaswamy because I think it bears fruit.
Another puppet. Whichever puppet they trot out. I think that they seem to have, on one hand, an affinity for people who are different from the standard trope of biological attributes and genetic attributes of a prior president. So maybe that'd be Michelle Obama. Although she's quite similar to another president whose last name was Obama, in which case maybe they would go with Gavin Newsom. It's going to be somebody else who's a useful vehicle for the managerial class in this country. And it almost, here's the dirty little secret, doesn't matter who it is. It's going to be somebody who actually continues to advance the interests of the bureaucracy. Joe Biden will not be the nominee. I said this last year. People dismissed it as some type of conspiracy theory. Today, I think it became that much more obvious. Play this out. Biden's own DOJ and special counsel is effectively releasing a report that undermines the case for him to actually be a candidate for the U.S. presidency.
I got a 3-point plan to fix everything.
We are expanding access to transportation. Seems like maybe it's a small issue, it's a big issue. You need to get to go and need to be able to get where you need to go to do the work and get home.
He'll fix the problems with all the dead crops. He's gonna make them grow again.
You have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years.
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions.
All kidding aside, it is objectively controversial for Biden to be pushed out as late as he was after gaining all the votes, and Kamala Harris going from 0 votes in the Democratic primary in 2020 to becoming vice president and then the nominee for the Democratic Party. We've actually never seen something like this happen in U.S. presidential politics, especially in the modern era. But moving on. Lastly, I'm going to address the 13 Keys by Alan Lichtman. He's become somewhat of a celebrity, and people say, well, he's a professor, he's a proven track record. He's picked 9 out of the last 10 presidential elections. The thing is that 6 of these 9 correct predictions were likely or expected. So they weren't bold calls by any stretch of the imagination. It's basically just picking the favorites. So you have 2004 with Bush-Kerry, and then you have the last 2 elections. Now with Bush-Kerry, it wasn't a tremendously bold pick because you did have the incumbency advantage. And then 2016, yes, it was bold to pick Trump, but there are a lot of people, such as myself, that picked Trump. And the previous election was tilting away from Trump, not just because of COVID, but because of the approval ratings. But it's the application of the keys. And Nate Silver, for example, has argued that you have at least 7, if not 8 of the keys. I personally think that there are 6 keys. You have to give charisma to Trump because even though he doesn't have this broad appeal, you understand that he has a very loyal base. Actually, since the approval ratings have been tracked since 1937, Trump has the smallest margin between highest and lowest, and his lowest approval rating was long after the election, after the January riots. If you compare to previous presidents, you have a slew. You got Truman, you got Nixon, Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush. Still, they had high approval ratings, and they had much lower approval ratings than Trump. So if you don't want to give it to him, okay, but Alan Lichtman, he gave the charismatic key to Obama in 2008, but not in 2012. And then there's foreign or military successes, which Alan gives because of Ukraine to the current administration, which I just wholeheartedly disagree. And he's extremely defensive. You know, if I look at just some of the postings, here's some cute examples, because because of his age, because 9 out of 10, the one that he didn't get right was the Al Gore Bush in 2000, and he contends that it was a stolen election, and basically the ballots weren't counted properly, all this other stuff. But it'll be interesting how this comes out. And ultimately, when somebody asked him, hypothetically, if Trump wins, how would you take it? He seems to look at it as an existential threat, that it's not just his keys, but that because his keys failed, then it means that it's a whole breakdown of American democracy. So you can see he has this inherent bias. And again, 9 out of 10 seems good on paper, but when you go case by case, you find out that only 3 of those 9 were, somewhat at least these bold calls or still coin flips at the end of the day. It's an interesting coincidence that the comparison with Nixon, from dubious aspects, is also the comparison of one of the greatest political comebacks in U.S. history. Nixon's 1968 comeback and the silent majority. However, I do think that Trump would supersede this, if for no other reason than the media being substantially more biased against him than Nixon's many quarrels.